Alright, so I just made another purchase on eBay. And I picked this up I made an offer of $46 and it was accepted. Let me show you what it is. It is a Cobra 146 GTL. Looks to be in decent condition. Faceplate's a little scuffed up, but the case looks nice. Looks like it sat in the sun. The meter's kind of faded. I don't know if you can see that, but it was advertised as for parts only. And the seller, I went and looked at the seller, and I'll show you the listing. As you can see on the original listing here, it was for a 146 GTL SSB with a 40 channel untested, and the seller has 100% positive. He was asking $54.95. I think I made an offer of $40 and he came back at, I think it was $46, which I accepted. And if you go ahead and look at the description, it says condition for parts not working. It says this unit has some wear but no actual damage. Please see the photos. So I looked at the photos. It looks pretty worn. But the item description said the radio is untested, and he says he doesn't have the power cable or a microphone to test it with. So he's selling it as is, no refund. Now, normally that could raise a red flag, but in this case it did not, because if you go ahead and look at his listings, he doesn't sell other radios. He kind of sells, looking through his pages, like electronic stuff, remotes. What else did he have? A water reservoir, a fireplace remote, a camcorder charger. Just little odds and ends, but no other radios. So I believe his description that he didn't have the ways to test it. If I buy a radio really cheap, I look at the seller. I look at their rating, and I also look to see if they sell a bunch of other CB radios. If they do, then I know they probably have the means to test them. And also sometimes when you look, and they do sell a lot of other radios, and they mention that the other radios work, but they mention this one wasn't tested, that's a huge red flag to me. So this one, I thought had the potential to be a good radio. It did not come with a microphone, so I hooked up an old JCPenney microphone. I have ordered a original, a vintage Cobra microphone, just waiting to get that. And if we go and we turn it on, we see it comes on. Sideband works. Okay, sideband works. And works. Now, I had it hooked up and I did a test on sideband, and it does transmit, but I'm getting reports of, what did he say? He said it sounded like it was almost like AM and sideband. It just wasn't a good signal. So if we go over to my meter here, and let's see, let's put it on AM, and we can see it dead keys 3.3 watts, and on sideband, test 1, 2, 3, audio check 1, 2, 3. We're putting around 14 watts. I'm really happy with that. So to me, that looks like someone hasn't been in messing around with any of the pots in there, because that looks right around factory specs. So that's good. What I'm assuming on this, if you look at the meter, it's kind of stuck, and it looks faded. I think this set probably in a car or a truck, and it probably had a lot of sun exposure, so it probably had temperature extremes. This looks like it was a well-used radio. Now, the reason I think this radio doesn't sound, or it doesn't transmit very well, I think it needs new capacitors. Another reason I bought this radio, I've had my eye open for one of these, is if you look at my Road Talker, my favorite radio, which is currently not working, do they look similar? They certainly do, and there's a reason for that. From what I've read, they share the same board. So, I have a working radio here, and I might be able to diagnose it with a good working radio here. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this up and replace the capacitors in it. So let's go ahead and open it and take a look at the inside, and let's see if we see any capacitors that look suspicious. And looking at it, you can see that the capacitors are the originals. And let's kind of zoom in here and take a look at things. We have a little, it's pretty dirty inside, so we're gonna go ahead and blow it out with some compressed air and try to make it look a little better. But none of the capacitors really look blown or anything. It's just very dirty. So, like I said, we're gonna order some capacitors and replace them and go from there and see what kind of reports we get on sideband. And I took some Q-tips and some 99% alcohol, and I cleaned the board out as best I could. It looks pretty good. And I removed all the capacitors, and I've started installing the new capacitors. I probably replaced about 1/4 of them with ones I had on hand, but I had to go ahead and order some new capacitors, so I'm waiting for those to come in the mail, and then we'll install them. Now, I went through with my multimeter, and I tested all the capacitors. Right here, these were all within specs. I just ran one test on them, and they were within the correct tolerance, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily good. And then over here were all the bad capacitors that were really out of spec. So that kind of confirms what I thought, and I believe it's the capacitors that's making the radio not sound very good. I'm really hoping that makes a difference. Now, I was comparing this to my Sears Road Talker 40, the board. It is the exact same board, I can confirm that. And I actually used the board to help me locate on the backside some of the capacitors that gave me problems last time locating where to unsolder. What I notice on this board, and I'm not sure if it came this way is I have a couple resistors mounted on the board. Now this looks really old, so I have a feeling that it probably came from the manufacturer like that. The solder looks probably as old as the rest of the solder on the board. And then the only other thing when I was unsoldering the resistors that I came across is right here. It looks like this trace, like a chunk is out of the trace. But it looks like it's still connected over here. I did a continuity test. I took some points up here on the board that were part of the same circuit and down here, and I did get continuity, so I know it's okay. But not quite sure how that happened. I didn't do it, so I don't know if that happened during the manufacturing of the board or not, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. If it would have been, where was that again? If it would have been a break, I've seen it done before. I could have ran a wire from here to bypass that break. But like I said, I think it's going to be okay. Looking at the speaker, this thing looks really dirty and old, and the paper looks like it's about to rip. It still worked when I had the radio on, but I think I might try to find another speaker. It's a 3-inch speaker, and I'll have to go look on the internet and see if I can find a replacement for it. And then the only other thing I want to replace right away will be, if I can find it, is the meter here. It's stuck. I could probably get it unstuck, but as you can see, it's really faded. And that just kind of goes along with, I think this thing sat in the sun and it's just faded. I also think, like I said before, I think it came from a smoker's house with the motherboard. Really took a lot to clean. It was like an oily film on everything, but I think I got it all cleaned up pretty well. And then my last good score here is this vintage Cobra microphone that will go nice with the radio. Cleaned up beautifully. This thing looks brand new. There's not a scratch on it. And believe it or not, I got this for $5, $4.99 on eBay. I was the only bidder. And with shipping, it only came to $10. So that's a bonus right there for the radio. That will go really nice with the radio. One thing that went so much better and easier this time on removing the capacitors was I was doing it wrong before. So I have my solder sucker here, but what I've started doing is putting flux on the solder, and then it just sucks up much easier. And then also when I started soldering on the capacitors, what I would do is put a little bit of solder, melt some solder on the tip here, and then it would flow. And then when I put the solder on the board here, it would flow much easier and put a nice little bead of solder on. And also I was running the temperature too cool. I burnt some old boards, and after reading, I read that you want to have the temperature at about 700 degrees. So I now solder at 700 degrees and no burns on the board or anything. So I'm happy with that. So that's my update for the Cobra 146 GTL. My capacitors should come in next week. Probably won't take too long to install them. In the meantime, I'll paint the case. I haven't decided if I want to do it a flat black or maybe the textured black. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments. I'm going to have to wait till it's a fairly warm day to go spray paint, which may be a while. So I'd like to get some opinions out there. So leave a comment. Tell me what color you think and what texture I should use on the paint. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.